Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for joining us for 4 panels in here. And so today I will review about the our self-collected samples comparable to physicians collected cervical specimens for human papillomavirus DNA testing. Okay, so I would like to present about the background of the study in here. So the human papillomavirus, or we can call HPV, is a sexually transmitted infection that can lead to cervical cancer. So cervical cancer detection and prevention rely heavily on HPV DNA testing. Cervical samples collected by physicians during a pelvic examination have traditionally been used for HPV and DNA testing. On the other hand, self-collected samples have gained popularity as an alternative method in recent years. So, several studies have been conducted to compare the comparability of self-collection samples and physicians' collection cervical specimens for HPV DNA testing. In general, the findings of the studies show that self-collected samples are comparable to physicians' collected samples in terms of HPV detection and accuracy. But before we start, I would like to introduce our 4 panels in here. So let's get it. Okay, so for the first panel in here, Ashila, could you please introduce yourself first?
Assalamualaikum, and my name is Ashila Shazad Metirida, matric number 289908, and I major in Islamic Banking and Finance.
Okay, thank you, Ashila. And so for the second panel, Noval, could you please introduce yourself first?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Noval Hartsegivibowo. My metric number is 276401, and I'm majoring in entrepreneurship.
Okay, so thank you, Noval, for your introduction. And so, third one is Azman. Please introduce yourself first.
Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone. My name is Muhammad Azman bin Luqman. My register number is 275489. My course is Bachelor of Muamalat Administration with Honors.
And for the last but not least is Adit. Okay, so could you please introduce yourself? Okay, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Rizky Aditya. My metric number 28291 and 1. I'm majoring in international business management.
Okay, so the first panel, Ashila, I want to ask about this case study. The first question is, what can you find the problem issue related to this article? And the second question is, what is the aim of this study? And could you please provide explanation for us?
Thank you, Tariq, for that good question. So, to answer, it is well known that the human papillomavirus, or also called as HPV, is the necessary cause of cervical cancer. However, the discovery of self-sampling may be able to hinder the problem or issue regarding self-sampling procedures. But however, there are some limitations that must be recognized. First, most of the available studies in the literature were observational and only one was randomized. It was a randomized trial. However, in all parties serve their own controls, limiting potential biases. Secondly, most studies were conducted in women having cervical disease. In this group of patients, the infection rate is generally greater than would be expected in population-based studies or systemic studies of asymptomatic women attending screening programs. Therefore, it is possible that these women may shed more HPV-infected cells into the vagina, which would then be collected more readily. Nevertheless, the two largest reported studies were performed under screening conditions and have shown a similar detection rate between the two sampling methods. Third, we observed the heterogeneity among studies on almost all outcomes. This probably reflects the absence of standardization for self and physician sampling methods and the wide variation in the population study. The different analytic methods for HPV detection and sampling procedures used, and the different clinical settings where sampling was performed. This heterogeneity does not allow us to conclude what we should do and consider as the best self-sampling procedure. Due to the limitations of the policy implications that I have um, mentioned, we cannot conclude that self-sampling can replace the current sampling practice performed by health professionals during a speculum examination. However, this study has a systemic review that lends support for an increased involvement of self-sampling in studies of on HPV transmission and of the impact of HPV vaccine in populations. Right. So the aim of this study is that it is a systemic review that wants to update the previously published meta-analysis by including all available relevant epidemiological studies on the accuracy of self and physician obtained samples to identify women infected by HPV in the anogenital tract. It also focuses on detectability as the outcome of interest for any positive test, whether originating from self or from physician sampling. The intent was to virologically detect only and not only comparing collection methods as their ability to distinguish HPV testing performance for detecting cervical precancerous lesions. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ashila, for the answer. And so, Noval, so could you please describe the variable and can you explain the definition of the variable in here?
So in descriptive statistic, there are variable with scale of measurement. So the first one is the personal factors or descriptive. The second one is nominal or qualitative, and last is ordinal. So based on the data, the personal factor is the inclusion criteria and PTS, and the nominal, it's the country and exclusion criteria, and the last one, the ordinal, it include device self, HPV test, and device physician. So that's all from me.
Okay, thank you, Noval, for your answer. And so the third panel in here is Azman. Azman, okay, so what is inferential statistic and function?
Now I'm going to talk about what is inferential statistics. Example of them and the two main uses of it. Inferential statistics use measurements from the sample of subjects in this experiment to compare the treatment groups and make generalizations about the larger populations of subjects. There are many types of inferential statistics and each is appropriate for a specific research design and sample characteristics. Inferential statistics describe the many ways in which statistics derives from observations or sample and study populations can be used to deduce whether or not these populations are truly different. Hypothesis testing, confidence intervals, regression analysis, analysis of bias, and chi-square tests are examples of inferential statistic tools. Inferential statistics have two main uses: making estimates about population, for example, the mean stochastic assessment test for overall irregular US, testing abilities to draw conclusions about population, for example, the relation between stochastic assessment test score and family income. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Azman. So we move to the last panel in here. So Adit, could you please tell us what is the scale and level measurement in here?
Okay, measurement scale are how variables are defined and categorized. There are four common levels of measurement scale: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Each measurement scale has properties that determine how to properly analyze the data. The following variables are likely involved: First, detection rate is a ratio type. This variable represents the percentage of sample in which HPV was detected. With separate detection rates report for self-sampling and patient sampling. The second is sensitivity, is a ratio type. This variable represents the sensitivity of the HPV detection method, which is proportion of true positive result compared to the total number of actually HPV infection. Third, HPV type categories is a ordinal type. This variable represents the classification of HPV into high risk and low risk. Third, sampling sites is a nominal type. This variable represents the anatomical site from which the sample were collected, such as the cervix or other anogenital sites. Five, geographical location of the study is a nominal type. This variable represents the geographical location where each study performed, which categorized by country. 6. Sample size is a ratio type. This variable represents the number of participants included in each study. 7. Sampling device is a nominal type. This variable represents type of device used to collect specimen sample. 8. HPV HE, HPV prevalence difference is type of interval type. This variable represents the difference in HPV prevalence between precision sampling and self-sampling. Ninth, accuracy of sampling method is interval type. This variable represents the accuracy of the each sampling method in detecting HPV infection. Last, agreement between sampling strategies is a ordinal type. This variable represents the level of agreement between self-sampling and precision sampling for the detection of HPV DNA and HR-HPV measured using kappa statistic. To analyze the data, statistical uh, were applied based on the scale of measurement of the variable involved, weight average with 95% confidence interval were calculated using a random effect model, providing estimates of the overall proportion of HPV detection. The Q statistic was utilized to assess statistical heterogeneity, indicating the degree of variation between studies. Furthermore, the unweighted kappa statistic was calculated to account for change agreement between sampling method, providing insight into the strengths of agreement. The Landis and Koch criteria were used to judge the level of agreement, ranging from poor to almost perfect. The subgroup analysis compared the detection rate between different subgroups with difference expressed as a percentage with 95% confidence interval. This allow for a detailed examination of variation in HPV detection rate among specific population. Okay, thank you.
So in conclusion is self-sampling methods are equivalent to conventional physical sampling methods for detection of genital, HR, HPV or HPV DNA irrespective of type. Standardization of self-sampling procedures should lead to be better comparability across studies and simplify the conduct of large-scale epidemiologic studies of HPV transmission and monitoring of the efficacy of HPV vaccines. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you for the panels in here, and thank you for the audience in here for give us attention. Thank you and have a good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.